The modern presidency is an office of immense authority. Today, the person sitting in the Oval Office commands a global military, dictates international policy, and shapes the daily lives of millions through swift executive action. But if we go back to 1789, the blueprint for this power structure is surprisingly sparse. The Founding Fathers drafted the Constitution, but they left the actual day-to-day operations of the presidency vague. George Washington had to define the job from scratch. He established the guardrails that still hold today, setting the precedent of leaving after 2 terms and ensuring power transferred peacefully to his successor. Over the next 2 centuries, 44 other men would inherit that same office. They would be forced to adapt the rules of executive power to keep the country alive through internal divisions, economic depressions, and global wars. The American presidency was not born with its current authority. It had to evolve. His successor, John Adams, established the physical seat of power by moving into the newly built White House. But it was Thomas Jefferson who realized the office could be used to alter the physical shape of the country itself. This map shows the scale of that ambition. With the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson acquired a swath of land from France that doubled the nation's footprint overnight. In just a few decades, this initial era of leaders proved the American democratic experiment could function. They took a fragile collection of colonies and showed that a central executive could govern a territory already outgrowing its original borders. The next wave of foundation builders moved to protect that new map. James Madison steered the nation through the War of 1812, and James Monroe followed by declaring the entire Western Hemisphere off-limits to European colonization. The office then shifted toward populism under Andrew Jackson. He championed expanding voting rights to the common man, but he used that same executive authority to enforce the removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands. What followed was a turbulent sprint of turnover. Martin Van Buren's term was consumed by the economic panic of 1837. William Henry Harrison died just 31 days into office. John Tyler alienated his party so badly that nearly his entire cabinet resigned. And James K. Polk pursued manifest destiny, annexing massive Western territories. These leaders oversaw a period of explosive growth. Yet the rapid expansion into new Western states created unresolvable fractures over slavery, divisions that were about to tear the country apart. As the nation divided, a vacuum of executive leadership accelerated the crisis. Zachary Taylor died unexpectedly in office. Millard Fillmore attempted to ease tensions with temporary compromises, but Franklin Pierce's backing of the Kansas-Nebraska Act only deepened the sectional conflict. Executive power reached its lowest point under James Buchanan. When Southern states finally began seceding, Buchanan failed to intervene, leaving the country on the precipice of war. Abraham Lincoln's election was the direct response to this threat. He inherited an office that had lost control of the nation. To preserve the Union, Lincoln pushed executive authority further than any predecessor. He waged a massive civil war and issued the Emancipation Proclamation, legally beginning the process of ending American slavery. The presidency survived its ultimate stress test. But Lincoln's assassination left the office with the task of reintegrating a fractured population and rebuilding a society whose social order had been upended. The post-war period was defined by fierce clashes over Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson fought Congress so bitterly he became the first president to be impeached. Ulysses S. Grant used federal troops to protect the civil rights of freed slaves, though corruption scandals marred his administration. The effort to modernize the government was messy. Rutherford B. Hayes ended Reconstruction to secure a disputed election. It took the assassination of James A. Garfield to spark civil service reform, a system enforced by his successor, Chester A. Arthur. The era produced unusual political results. Grover Cleveland served 2 non-consecutive terms, fighting intense political machines, while Benjamin Harrison signed the first antitrust laws to try and rein in growing corporate monopolies. Throughout the late 19th century, the presidency was largely a reactive institution. Leaders struggled to manage an exploding, industrialized, and often corrupt political machine. As the 20th century began, the office was forced to look outward. William McKinley led the nation to victory in the Spanish-American War, gaining overseas territories like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. Theodore Roosevelt expanded the scope of the office. He championed conservation and directed massive infrastructure projects like the excavation of the Panama Canal. Woodrow Wilson navigated the nation through the First World War. At home, his tenure coincided with massive societal shifts, including the passage of the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. By the 1920s, the presidency had moved beyond its domestic roots. The office now steered the interests of a global power, with influence that reached far beyond the North American continent. The 1920s brought economic growth under Calvin Coolidge, who favored limited government intervention. But when the economy collapsed, Herbert Hoover's inability to fix the crisis defined his legacy, as millions of Americans found themselves standing in unemployment and breadlines. Franklin D. Roosevelt changed the government's economic role. His New Deal programs directly intervened in the markets to put millions back to work. He then guided the nation through World War II, becoming the only president ever elected to 4 terms. The technical stakes of the office reached a new extreme. Harry S. Truman made the decision to use atomic bombs, ending the war but introducing the unprecedented threat of atomic warfare into executive decision-making. Dwight D. Eisenhower oversaw a period of stabilization. He utilized the post-war economy to build modern infrastructure, like the interstate highway system, connecting the country's major cities on a massive scale. These mid-century crises required the president to manage global markets and command the first atomic arsenal. The office was now the primary architect of the modern global economy. The 1960s brought an era of intense societal upheaval. Following the vision and assassination of John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson assumed the presidency during a deeply volatile era. Johnson pushed through civil rights legislation and launched programs to fight poverty. Yet these domestic achievements were overshadowed by the escalating and divisive Vietnam War. Richard Nixon opened diplomatic relations with China and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam. However, his role in the Watergate scandal broke public trust, forcing him to become the first president to resign. Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter both focused on repairing the nation's fractured trust in government. This set the stage for Ronald Reagan, who championed economic deregulation and took a hard-line stance in the Cold War, famously demanding the Soviets tear down the Berlin Wall. This era demonstrated a harsh reality. The modern presidency holds immense global authority, yet it remains vulnerable to domestic unrest and a loss of public faith. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, George H.W. Bush emphasized global diplomacy. Bill Clinton then presided over a long peacetime economic boom, balancing the federal budget, even as he became the second president to be impeached. The trajectory of the 21st century presidency shifted on September 11th. George W. Bush responded to the attacks by launching wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Barack Obama became the first African-American president. His administration focused on major domestic overhauls, passing healthcare legislation and investing in clean energy. Donald Trump followed by actively disrupting established political norms. He drove an America First trade agenda, tightened borders, and navigated deep political divisions that led to 2 impeachments. Joe Biden then took the helm, steering the government through the COVID-19 pandemic, signing massive relief bills, and pursuing major infrastructure reforms. And the timeline continues to twist. In 2025, Donald Trump secured a second non-consecutive term, becoming only the second president in history to pull off that specific electoral comeback. The U.S. presidency is not a static institution. It is a living reflection of America itself, evolving from a restricted, localized role into a position that commands global influence, continuously shaped by the individuals who hold it. Which era or leader do you think made the biggest impact on the country? Let us know in the comments below.